What's up, me woes nards? It's Dev, aka Heavy Diesel, aka The Big Easy, aka Thick Rick. From Mtg, I got Ziggy with me. We like it to magic, and today's deck ain't just big, it's huge! Let's look at Naya Giants, why don't we?
Yo, I'm sorting through some heinous haters like a pooper scooper. I'm just trying to take my life like a Koopa Trooper. I'm double Mario, that mean I'm super. And I'm freaking dangerous like a Chupa Chupa Cabre. Got them all day like a Kanye, but I'm way better getting cheddar in Monterey. But Jack, you don't know, man. You got the show, man. You want roast beef? Well, I'm Arby's.
Now, we are the ones to be telling you about this deck. Not only is Ziggy a certified giant, look at the size of this catfish right here. You are ridiculous, bub, but so am I. 6'1", 305, love every glorious inch of myself. Same thing with this deck. I love every single card in the dang thing. Not only because Giants Tribal is just fun, that's a cool idea, but this is actually one of the decks I've been most successful with on Arena all season long. The thing is actually pretty stacked, so let's get to it. Now, the whole idea, and really the only payoff for Giants Tribal, starts and ends with the notorious RCG. This thing begs the question, well, why don't we just play a bunch of Giants then, right? And we just like turn 5 or even before then some of the time. We can blow up our opponents like a whole side of the table. I don't even care what you're doing over there. And just leave behind a bunch of 5/5s. It seems like a good idea, and in practice, it is. Who would have thought that? And even if you don't leave behind a board full of Giants on your side of the table, a couple turns later you get 7/7 Vigilance. There's nothing wrong with that. That said, there's going to be some games where it leaves behind 2 Giants the first time you cast it. You just swing for 9 or 10, you end the game, whoops. But there'll be other games where it takes multiple Realm-Cloaked Giants to really put things away. But we're prepared for that. We brought 4 to the fight. And we do need all 4. Not only is it the most important card in the deck, but it's just one of the best weapons against aggro decks and even other mid-range decks at the moment. Now, Realm-Cloak might be the only reason to play like a Giants Tribal theme, but it also helps that most of the other Giants in Standard are actually really playable, like Bonecrusher Giant, who ain't never scared. F in chat if you get that joke. But anyway, the card is just one of the best cards in Standard. It actually gives us like decent playable turn 2 removal against smallish creatures, and that's really relevant right now. Plus, this gives us like an above curve body on turn 3 too. Something that's a lot more meta-specific that I really ought to bring up when talking about Bonecrusher Giant is how good it is, especially on the play, against these Simic mid-range decks, the Oko decks, and all that, because this will take down a Gilded Goose on the play before they get to untap and use it. And it'll go toe-to-toe and trade with the Questing Beast in combat, which is pretty decent for a creature that you're casting on turn 3. Moving on, we're also running 4 copies of the old Jolly Green right here, Mr. BS. But Beanstalk Giant is anything but BS, right? This guy is actually a really good ramp piece right now that does kind of soak up our turn 3, but ramps into and makes sure we get the second white source for a Realm-Cloaked Giant on the next turn. That in and of itself is an important enough play to run the card, plus it's a giant, and the creature half is good enough too. I mean, 7 mana is a lot, but the biggest Beanstalk Giant I've made is a 13/13, and that's probably nowhere even close to the record on Beanstalk Giant. That makes me wonder what the record is for the biggest Beanstalk Giant. But all that thinking aside, it's nice to have a Deuterino that can get this big. It's technically the biggest creature in the deck. That also enables a bunch of really important plays like turn 4 Realm-Cloaked Giant. And we've got a bunch of like 4-drop Giants in this deck that have really strict mana requirements, and BS helps us hit all those too, so just a really important card. Y'all notice that like since we moved to the house, Ziggy doesn't actually sit in my lap anymore. He sits in my lap for like 2 minutes, and then he gets comfortable over here, which is totally cool. You be you, buddy. You're your own person, and I respect you. Or you're chill. But anyway, just something I noticed. But let's move on, because we got more Giants to cover, actually. There's 3 copies of Sunder Shaman in this deck, and 1 copy of Rampart Smasher. I decided to make a split here, because you do come across Knights sometimes. And Rampart Smasher is pretty dumb against Knights, because you just don't have to care about their creatures. You get inconsistent damage one way or the other. But as far as Sunder Shaman, this is, I think, the better card, even though it's technically harder to cast, all things considered. It's still pretty decent in this format right now, where you can randomly kill, like, Doom Foretold's occasionally, like Fires of Invention and stuff, plus a whole host of other things. If nothing else, you can usually pop a food with this, and if your opponent's tapped out, they're SOL, but otherwise you just force them to sacrifice the food when they otherwise wouldn't want to. There's a bunch of weird stuff you can do when you actually do combat damage with a Sunder Shaman. And to my surprise, the first line of text on Shaman actually kind of is relevant, like a lot. The fact that they can't double or triple block this actually really helps in a lot of games. So don't completely just discount or skip over that first line of text. It's important. Also, like 4 mana 5/5 is just a pretty decent stat line. We need more Giants in this deck, but that said, I don't want to play like really bad Giants, So I stopped at that. I stopped at 16. That's all the Giants that we're playing. But that doesn't mean that we're done with creatures, because I'm also playing 4 Arboreal Grazer in here. We need the ramp, and we also need something to block for us in the first few turns, you know. Otherwise, we'd be fairly bad against aggro, because our curve is fairly high in this deck, and we don't have a whole lot of things to do in the early game. So I like to throw down an Arboreal Grazer and actually have a blocker there for a few turns. But when it actually comes time for Realm-Cloaked Giant to cast off the realm, I guess. I don't care that this goes with it. We don't need it anymore, but by then it's definitely done its job. It's a great early blocker, and we need that ramp. But now into the non-creature stuff, and I have to do an abrupt pivot to 2 copies of Nissa Who's Shaken That Thing. I'm sorry, because it looks like this isn't really the kind of deck that you'd see Nissa in, but it turns out this deck has forests in it. So it's a Nissa deck. It's a mid-range deck. So it's a Nissa deck. It's just probably like the best mid-range card in the entire format right now, and it's going to outvalue a lot of opponents. We might lose a land here and there when we go to Realm-Cloaked Giant, but it turns out we also have agency. If you really need a Realm-Cloaked Giant, or you've got one in your hand you're about to cast, just don't make 3 of your lands into creatures, unless you absolutely have to. It's that easy, but it turns out that the extra ramp is going to help. We can even ultimate this reliably in some games, but there's other times where just a 3/3 every turn is going to be exactly what you need to outvalue an opponent. So, again, the deck has green, and it's a mid-range deck, so this is probably the best choice for it, whether we like it or not. But I'm also playing 4 Once Upon a Time in this deck. This helps us get lands in the early game and helps us find that Realm-Cloaked Giant or maybe a Bonecrusher in the early game against aggro. I mean, I could keep naming things. The card just finds anything that we could need at any given moment, and we can cast it for free. Let's play all 4. That seems reasonable to me, so let's move on to some removal here, because I'm playing 2 copies of Lava Coil in the 2-drop slot. Now, we don't really have a whole lot of desirable 2-drops that I actually want to play in this deck. I actually considered like Bond of Flourishing and even Pacifism for a while to get rid of like Wicked Wolves. We'll talk more about that later, but anyway. This turns out to be just one of the best cards we could be playing right now. Not only does this take out Questing Beast, yeah, we usually have to take a shot in the mouth, but it takes out Questing Beast at a mana advantage. I'm fine with that, but it takes out pretty much every other important creature in the format, except for like a huge Hydroid Krasis or something. But just a really nice anti-aggro card to have, and it's going to be less dead in games nowadays than it has been over the last few months. But I don't really feel like I have to justify playing Lava Coil that much. We need early removal. Now, a card that I do have to justify playing, and it's probably the spiciest inclusion in the deck, is Response Resurgence. You'll note that I'm playing 2 whole copies of this card. Well, that's because I was playing 1, and it's really good, Jack. This card is awesome right now, considering it is an instant speed answer to Questing Beast. And if it did literally nothing else, it would still be playable. But in this color combination, it's one of the only real instant speed answers to a hasty Questing Beast, so it's just worth playing for that reason. But it also takes out other relatively big attackers and blockers on occasion, but I'm not really worried about taking out blockers that much. It's mostly attackers that I'm worried about, and this kills Questing Beast for 2 mana at instant speed. I'll take that. But what this also does on occasion is give us 2 attack steps with a bunch of like literal giants, giant dudes, a 7/7 and a 5/5 and a 10/10 Beanstalk Giant, and being able to untap and get a second attack phase in with those guys is usually game over. So Response Resurgence almost always has something to do, whether it's meta specific or it's just, paying 5 mana to win the game. That happens sometimes too. So I will die on this hill. Response Resurgence actually deserves a second look right now. But to finish off the main deck, another piece of removal that I don't have to justify, that's Prison Realm. I'm going to play all 4 copies of this, and I'm always amazed when I see decks with white in them that are mid-range. I'd only play like 2 or 3 copies of this in the main deck. I don't get it. Like, the most popular deck in the format right now is Oko, and Prison Realm is the best answer to Oko. Questing Beast, again, you gotta take a shot in the mouth. Wicked Wolf, a card that we absolutely freaking hate. Prison Realm is good against every single one, and it gives us a Scry. That's not bad. If we need like another land, or we're trying to get to a Realm-Cloaked Giant or something, the Scry isn't quite drawing a card, but we really need effects like that in this deck, because we don't have effects that do draw cards. That's noticeably absent from our mid-range deck. So Scrying, we'll take it one way or the other, but, this is just kind of the best answer to like all of the most atrocious and prevalent cards in the format right now. So you just play the whole playset. Now this deck runs 26 lands at present, 14 green, 13 red, and 11 white sources, but we've got Fabled Passage in there, not to mention Beanstalk Giant, and even Once Upon a Time to find colored sources when we need to. So things like 11 white, even when we're trying to cast Realm-Cloaked Giant, aren't actually as bad as they seem. That said, I do want to run 26 whole lands in here to make sure that we hit the proper number of colored sources, even if we do have Fabled Passage and Beanstalk Giant. Plus, we've got our Boreal Grazer, so extra lands are kind of what we need to be doing anyway. And in the late game, extra lands off the top of your library aren't necessarily dead because they technically kind of put a +1/+1 counter on Beanstalk Giant. So I think 26 is the right number here. Now here's the sideboard that I ended up on, and honestly, the Naya color combination is wide open in terms of sideboard options right now, but let me explain why I ended up on what I ended up on here, with Veil of Summer needing the least explanation. It's just a silly card right now, turns Noxious Grasp in game 2 and 3 into you draw cards. So that's pretty insane and does all kinds of fun stuff right now. So at least 3 copies of Veil of Summer. There's a reason it's an $8 uncommon at the moment now. Devout Decree I've gone with 2 copies of, even though most decks with white will just go with 3 copies on principle, but I'm more worried about green creatures in specific, but green and blue stuff in general, than red and black creatures. There's just other stuff I want to do slots on here, so I went with 2 instead of 3. A Conclave Tribunal to act as a 5th copy of Prison Realm. This is against the green creatures that I care about and the green and blue planeswalkers that I care about. Oka, Wizard, Wicked Wolf, Hydroid Krasis, Questing Beast. I mean, just Conclave Tribunal is gas against pretty much all of those, so we'll play 1 copy as a 5th copy of Realm. But there's also 2 Cindervines in there, decent against the Esper Dance decks, the Doom Stacks decks that play Doom Foretold. Also pretty decent against Fires of Invention, or also any deck that wants to play a bunch of non-creature spells is pretty hot against too. So just a couple of copies of Cindervines in there, a couple of Flame Sweep. I was going to play Deafening Clarion here, but I really don't want to take care of my own Bonecrusher Giant when I'm trying to kill their creatures. So I went a little bit lower and used Flame Sweep here. We really care about tiny aggro, especially stuff like Cavalcade of Calamity. This will kill most of the creatures in those decks, but it won't kill a Chandra Spitfire, which isn't going to be in every version of the Calamity decks, but just in case it is, we have Collision Colossus in there to take it out, and a handful of other flyers right now. There's also a couple of copies of Sorcerer's Spyglass in here. Oh yeah, by the way, the Rampart Smasher, let me talk about that for a second. It's for when we play against Knights. Now, the Sorcerer's Spyglass, on the other hand, is kind of the best thing we have against Oko right now. And probably any other Planeswalker, but mostly Oko. We slap down a Sorcerer's Spyglass, name Oko, and that invalidates like half of what they're trying to do in that game. But sometimes we can also slap it down, name Wicked Wolf, a card that we absolutely freaking hate. So just keep that in mind. But 9 times out of 10, we're going to name Oko with this card. Now here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 67, which is pretty impressive. I mean, it's kind of a classic mid-range deck at its core with one exception. A lot of mid-range decks have to play removal and solid creatures. This deck gets to play both of those cards in the same cards. Realm-Cloaked Giant and Bonecrusher Giant are both removal and big meaty creatures. That's a mid-range deck's dream, and mid-range decks have always wanted to be able to play like main deck sweepers, but the problem is they have their own creatures, and they don't want to kill those guys. Spend mana on those guys. In this deck, we don't have to do that, aside from Arboreal Grazer. We can play Bonecrusher Giant on 3, Sunder Shaman on 4, Realm-Cloaked Giant, and keep our creatures out while still sweeping the other side of the board. That means we've got the game locked up against a lot of other mid-range decks right now, save for when they actually land an Oko and we don't get a Prison Realm for it. That card is still very good against us, just like it's good against everything else, but against most mid-range decks in this format, we got it sewn up, and even most of the aggro decks, given that we have to have time to get to Realm-Cloaked Giant, but if we can get a turn for a Realm-Cloaked Giant, the game's pretty much over against the majority of aggro decks as well. Add that to the fact that there's not really like a dedicated control deck in the format right now that we would just be like abysmal against. And this is a really solid deck right now that, I'll say again, has given me a lot more success on Arena than I've been having with a few of the decks that I've been decking lately. This is by far the most solid deck that I've played in a good long time, and it's fun to play. Who would have known that? But it's fun to just eradicate your opponent's side of the board and keep a bunch of fat dudes on yours. So I hope you get a chance to try this thing out for yourself. I mean, as far as meme decks go, it actually feels like appropriately powerful, you know. We did like mono black Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven, the cat food deck. We did green black Smitten Shotgun and all that. And these are meme decks, but they're not like, they don't feel powerful. This, on the other hand, can actually turn your memes into dreams. So go out there, give your opponents the clinical fear of giants. You know what that's called? Fee-fi-phobia. Sorry, I had to work a pun in here or there, you know, earn my living. I know that's what some people come for. Most of you come for Ziggy, though. He's been really sleepy this whole video. Anyway, I hope you get a chance to try this thing out. Just click the first link in the description, go over to TCG Player, check out the deck list, pick up any pieces that you need for the lowest prices on the internets. Anyway, they're a good place to buy Magic cardboard, but aside from that, do all the other stuff if you would on your way out. Before you hit the lights, just like the video, share it if you would, that'd be really cool. Put it in more people's recommended feeds by hitting that thumbs up button, or you can subscribe. It's like one of the best ways to help you do that is just like hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. But the absolute best way to help me out is just going over to the Patreon, link in the description, or patreon.com/SBMTG if you don't know by now, and just throw $1 in. That's all I really ask from you every month. $5 gets you a signed card, so does $10 for that matter, and your name in the credits at the $10 level. But, you know, for just $1 a month, I'll let you pick what decks and stuff we do around here in the first place. So go over there if you've got the skrill and the desire. If not, I hope you just like the video and all that. Even if you don't thumbs up the video, I just kind of appreciate that you're still here. Watch time is a really important metric, so yeah, and just thanks. Appreciate you coming by. That means a lot to me. But in any case, I think I'm done with Naya Giants for now, but just hit me up with any tech that I missed down there or any cards I didn't play that you would have played. I know some people are playing the like 6-mana Boros Giant that hits all your opponent's creatures for 1. I think that guy's pretty bad. But anyway, just let me know. Just let me know what you would have played down there in the comment section, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind. Now it's time for that Patreon shout out, you know. This one goes out to Adam W. Layton. I like to call him the Professor. Professor Layton. Thanks for being a patron. I just want to say that you've been a patron for a good long time. I've sent you a bunch of cards, friend, but I just wanted to say thanks. You're really cool. You helped me do this for a living. That's really, really nice. You don't have to do that. You do it anyway, so thanks. Thanks, Professor.